Welcome back to the Abundant Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Allison Pereira. I am here with Linda Ugelow. We'll redo that part. I am here with Linda Ugelow, and we're going to be talking about something that a lot of therapists shy away from. We're going to be talking about public speaking. And as someone who used to be terrified of public speaking and now do it a fair amount, I'm really excited about what you're going to share with us because there is access to so much of what we want in our practice when we have kind of gotten through some of the fear of public speaking. And there's so much service we can provide through public speaking. So thanks for being here.
I'm so happy to and excited to get into this conversation.
Yeah. So let's talk some. I mean, I think there are lots of avenues for public speaking for therapists. There's kind of talk, there are workshops, retreats, group consultations, these kinds of things where we might freeze up. As therapists, we're often taught to not really exist too much in the room as people. A lot of us in our don't hide your humanity, essentially. And then the more we practice, the more we realize that's not really a thing that we need to be concerned about. So the idea of being front and center, of being seen, can be really confronting to a lot of therapists. So I'm curious how you work with people to move through some of that fear of public speaking that's so common.
Well, I think that therapists of all people will understand this, that the fear of speaking isn't random.
Hmm.
That's always connected to something. And even though I have a background in psychology, I have a master's degree in expressive arts therapy, I didn't realize my lifelong fear of speaking might be connected to past experiences I had.
Hmm.
And it
Hmm.
wasn't until I took a coaching program and I was online and wanting to build that coaching business, needed to get in front of people,
Hmm.
that I realized that I was terrified of being on camera. And at the time it was 2015 and live streaming became a thing. It was a
Hmm.
brand new thing. Only a few people kind of knew about it at the time, and it was an app called Periscope.
Uh-huh. I remember it.
Do
I
you
remember the little
remember
sound
it?
it made. Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
so cool. That's so cool. You know, you got on the platform, you typed in your topic, and then you could see who was joining from where. So you would see, people from India and Turkey and France and California, and it was like shown to everybody. There was no algorithm. There was a map, a little light would blink over Boston, which was my area, and anyone in the world could look at that map at any time and say, "Oh, I wonder who's talking in Boston. What
Hmm.
are they chatting about?" So it was abundant, an abundant audience. And I remember when I would press broadcast and people would come on, my heart was pounding, my breath, I hyperventilated. I even felt like I was leaving my body, like
Hmm.
I was hovering above myself. But I'd been a performer for 40 years with Women's World Music Group. We'd done, I don't know, over 500 performances by the end of my 4 decades with them. So I knew and I had skills to like bring myself down into my body and to focus and you know perform, so that people probably didn't know that I was as having a panic attack
Uh-huh.
inside.
Yeah.
And I assumed that doing this day after day, because all the marketing gurus said you got to get on daily to build your following. And I,
Hmm.
I assumed that, oh, after a few weeks, I'll be fine. And in the meantime, I'll meditate, I'll do deep breathing and power poses and affirmations and all these ways to manage the fear so I
Hmm.
could get on and be composed. By the way, what I was talking about was how not to stress in your
Huh?
business.
Love it. Love the parallel process.
A little parallel process and a bit of irony. After, the weeks went on because I got into this daily routine. And at week 10, I was about to get on and I realized my heart is still racing. I was still hyperventilating.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden it occurred to me, I'm managing my fear, but my fear hasn't gone.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to manage my fear. I wanted my fear to be gone. I didn't want to have to think about it. I didn't want to have to worry about it. I didn't want to be distracted by it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is most insidious about the fear of speaking is that it's distracting. It takes up mental bandwidth
Mm-hmm.
on so many physically, mentally, you're worried on some level. You're worried that it's going to show. You're trying to minimize it. When you really want to put your energy into communicating
Right.
instead of managing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that therapists understand this from with their clients. So I decided I was going to get rid of it. I mean, I had already done all the Google searches to figure out, what was available publicly to help me, and I'd read books, and nothing really got to me. But I decided, okay, what are the tools I know? And one of them is something called focusing. And probably, many of your people in your audience have heard of it, where you listen into your body and you imagine the distress in your body and you speak to it from a body place.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to close my eyes and ask the fear if the fear could talk, what would it say?
Mm-hmm.
And what came back to me was, you're going to be attacked.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, I remembered all these childhood experiences where my sisters attacked me every time mom put me in the center of attention.
Hmm.
She would say, Linda's such a good girl. Why can't you two girls be more like Linda?
Oof. Yeah.
Yeah, of course they
She set you
hated.
up. Yeah.
She set it up. I know.
Yeah.
And here's another irony. I was the good girl because I saw them get punished and I
Mm-hmm.
thought that's never going to happen to me. And it never did from mom, but it certainly did from my sisters.
Yeah.
And then I had this duh moment. Of course I'm not comfortable being the center of attention because I learned it was dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to think, well, what else taught me it was dangerous? And I thought about in seventh grade when all the girls said, nobody talked to Linda, and no one did for 4 days.
Oh.
And I remember how impactful that was because after that, I thought, people don't want to hear from me.
Mm-hmm.
People don't want to hear what I have to say. And then I thought about how that time I brought home my straight A report card and mom looked at it and she said, why an A minus and not an A plus? And feeling like, oh, I'm not good enough for her.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be perfect in order to be good enough. Countless other things. I started to like comb through my, what I call the psychic closet, the Jungian, idea of the
Mm-hmm.
psychic closet of the psyche and just kind of clean out whatever I could find, like what was there that may have impacted me. And it turned out that I had some self-help tools that I had been taught by a friend, Eliza Bergeson, who was a kinesiologist, a transformational kinesiologist. One was EFT. I also had been using creative visualization from a book called Creative Visualization by Shakti Gawain. Everyone who was around and interested in the 70s or the 80s, I think it came out in 86.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had that book.
Uh-huh.
And then I did journaling and I did dance because my background's in dance movement therapy. And at night I remember lying awake in the middle of the night thinking, okay, who else said anything mean to me or anything that made me belittled me or shamed me or I felt, you know, humiliated and I forgave them.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, I forgive you for, embarrassing me in front of the class. I forgive you. And then I forgave myself. And after 5 days, and I'm still doing my Periscope daily. After
Mm-hmm.
5 days, my heart wasn't racing.
Huh. Right.
I felt present because I wasn't being pulled into the past, even unconsciously, by these things. And it was thrilling. And I went on to do another 200 days of live streaming, feeling very present, very happy, like delighted. And it wasn't that I started to work with people with this right away. I actually kind of kept it to myself, but I mentioned to a few people that I had done this for myself. And all of a sudden, people started to say, "Oh, do you think it would work for me?" And I said, "I don't know. I had my issues. I have my modalities that I like, but let's try it." And so the one thing led to the other. And once I realized that this was something that could help other people,
Hmm.
and not just people getting on camera, because that's where I was. I wasn't a speaker on a stage.
Hmm.
Although in my Women's World Music group, I did have to introduce songs, and that totally changed too. Oh my gosh. When my song came up to be introduced, I remember thinking, oh good, it's my turn to speak.
Hmm.
And like that
Wow.
feeling of enthusiasm was revelatory to me, that I could actually look forward to it rather than dread it.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, in the meantime, once I started work with clients, I discovered all these other areas that can be impactful
Hmm.
that I hadn't realized when I was just working with myself or with my first client. So, as therapists, I'm not a therapist. I'm not licensed as a therapist, but we all know that we learn from our clients, right?
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And it's the same thing in this area of what are the experiences that people had that impacted them. Because I'd question them. I'd have them reflect back. And when we couldn't find the things in the areas that I was aware of, something would pop up. For instance, I had one client who he said, I had a lot of friend groups, because I asked him, what about your friends?
Hmm.
And he said, I had a lot of friend groups, but I always felt on the outside. I had the nerd friends and the drama friends and the athletes, and but I was never on the inside. And I said, is it possible that you felt like, oh, those are the people who should be asked. Those are the people who are popular. Those are the people that others want to hear from. No one really wants to hear from me. Kind of like when I got bullied in seventh grade.
Hmm.
And he said, oh my gosh, yes, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Or another client I had, we couldn't find anything in his family. So totally supportive, but not too much, not too pushy, great with his siblings. And then in school, he was liked by all his teachers and he had friends and he was never bullied. And then I said, where were you in your class rank? And he said, oh, I was valedictorian. I said, do you think it's possible that you felt that people liked you, people valued you because you were so smart, that you were always at the top of your class, that you were always perfect? Because remember, in school, you get the highest grades for not making any mistakes.
Hmm.
And he said, yeah, I feel like if I make any mistake, I'm a failure and that people aren't going to like me.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah. And it's interesting because it's such a common fear. It's easy to write it off as just like this is a thing humans are afraid of,
That's right.
instead of taking some time and some intention and seeing what is it that I specifically am afraid of? Like, what is this rooted back into from my past that keeps me scared and keeps me not trying it, or keeps
Yes.
me not exposure therapying my way through it?
Yes. And
Um,
this is why I feel that that idea that it's in our human design to be afraid, I think it's just the opposite. Because if you look at kids, when they're learning to speak, you can't get them to stop.
uh-huh.
So what happens? And they're completely unself conscious.
Hmm.
What happens between then and now? Well, it's all
Hmm.
the conditioning that we had.
Right.
It's the dysfunctional family systems, it's the school system that makes us afraid of mistakes, that embarrasses us in front of schoolmates, that the mean teachers, or the testing, and feeling like we're being scrutinized and evaluated on every move we make, and that the idea of expressing ourselves freely is stamped down because of classroom management, and that there's one way to get to the right answer instead of multiple ways. I mean, there's been a lot of new research and intelligence that's been infused, but basically the system is very traumatic for most
Hmm.
people. Very few people get out of school not feeling some kind of injury from the
Right.
experience.
Right. Which also, has to do with the age. Like we can't get
Mhm.
through adolescence without injury. We can't get through, especially like navigating those relationships, friendships, hormones, all of it. Like it's all
Right.
just a messy, messy mix.
It's very messy, and our society is messy. And one of the things that I think is so beautiful about therapists is that you're light workers. We are trying to help change human consciousness and society. So it's a kinder, more supportive and encouraging place.
Right. Right. So I'm hearing for therapists who, like, maybe when they've thought about the impact they want to have on the world or a marketing strategy to fill their practice, they've considered public speaking at some level. Um, what I'm hearing is if you're reticent or if you cannot keep your panic at bay after multiple times of trying, there's likely some tendrils into your past that are worth exploring.
I love
Um,
that word, tendrils. Yes.
yeah.
And like in my book, Delight in the Limelight, I lay out a framework, a
Mhm,
three-part framework. And the first part is to reveal and heal.
mhm,
So to uncover what could be the reason why you decided it was safer to hide.
mhm. Yeah.
And then to heal it with I have my modalities, but you can use any kind of modalities. I promote a multimodality approach just because I feel that we're multidimensional. And when it goes to like healing these things, I love something called EFT or emotional freedom technique. Some people know it
Mhm,
as tapping, but I don't rely on it alone. I then may do some like inner parenting, inner child work, do some physical because I'm a movement person. I might
yeah.
do some music, movement, doing forgiveness, definitely, because ultimately we want to let go. We want to change the relationship that we had to the past.
Right.
I'm talking to the choir here,
Mhm.
but just as a reminder, it's the same thing with the sphere of public speaking, and it could be the way that we and all of the listeners as therapists, it's there a growing edge for them to be able to heal another aspect of their past because all therapists have done a lot of healing work but maybe haven't thought about this particular area.
Right, right. Because it's just so ubiquitous, right? Like
Yes.
everybody's afraid of public speaking, so.
Right, exactly. And that's why it never occurred to me. The tools that I use to get over my fear, I had those for probably 2 decades. I
Hmm.
just didn't know I had stuff to heal
Right, right.
until that I came up against that block
Hmm.
in a very public way.
Yeah. And I imagine I can't think of anyone who hasn't gotten the message to stop talking, to be smaller, that what they have to say isn't important, that who they are isn't important. I can't think of a single person who hasn't had that experience at some point growing up and into their young adulthood.
Yeah. There I have come across some. Even as I said, among my clients, I've had a
Hmm.
couple. In fact, I also worked with somebody recently who loved speaking, felt really, really good at it until last year.
Hmm. Hmm.
And she wasn't sure what happened. What happened that she lost her confidence and it was interesting. She kind of set herself up.
Hmm.
She it was twofold. One is that she set herself up, and two, that she has a very competitive nature and also very smart at the top of her class, liked being better than other people.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so she had taken over somebody's position who had ended their tenure on a high note. He had gotten, he had invested in some coaches to help him create his last presentation to the organization. He killed it.
Hmm.
And she went in and she said the next year, she said, wasn't that he amazing? He killed it. Let's see if I can top him.
Mm.
And I was thinking, no, don't say that.
Right.
Please tell. It's akin to somebody introducing you as this person's the funniest person you'll ever hear. You're going to be, and then everyone's like waiting. Okay, is he funny?
Mhm.
Is he funny? No, you don't want to set yourself up with high expectations that then you have to fulfill.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that happened to her. And the other is that her mother had recently passed away, and she didn't realize, like, she's not a person who cries.
Hmm.
And when she decided to say something or refer to her mom in her talk because it fit in with something, and as she did it, she became emotional,
Mm.
and it threw her off. And all
Yeah.
of a sudden, she was afraid that she was going to, like, her voice got shaky, and she felt like unstable and distracted, obviously. And
Hmm.
all of a sudden, she was afraid, oh, now what's going on with me? She started to downward spiral. Is this going to happen again? And so we needed to unpack that.
Hmm.
Why did she get triggered? And and also, like, unpack, is it okay to be emotional when you speak? And
Right.
does it mean that you're going to fall apart? Or can you have a moment and also gift an audience with a moment?
Yeah. I
Connect
can
with,
imagine that was the most riveting moment of her entire talk.
absolutely, but it terrified her.
Right.
And it set her up for fearing the next talk she was going to give.
Hmm.
I mean, what was interesting, I don't know where this came from, but I said to her, how about you're like, she was really hooked on people telling her how great she was.
Hmm.
I said, how much do you feel you need people to tell you how great you are in order to feel how great you are? Maybe, is it possible that you've had enough? Like, if it still comes, how wonderful, what a gift that is. But can you decide that it's more important what you communicate than people say that was amazing?
Hmm.
And that shifted it for her. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that on some level we can easily get caught up on, because we want to feel like we're good enough. We want to feel like we're okay,
Hmm.
that people like us, that they like what we have to say, that that they think well of us,
Yeah.
that they hold us in regard. So there is part of us that wants people to say, what a great speaker you are, or that was wonderful, or I love listening to you. That feeds a part of us that maybe didn't get it earlier on. And so it's like a little hole in the bucket that needs to fill up, that we may not like admitting to, but it's there.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember I told you I performed with the Women's World Music Group.
Hmm.
And as a I was the principal dancer. And I did this one dance. It's a trance dance from Egypt. It's so powerful. And people would often cry. It's very simple, but it's emotional, and it builds up and then it like ends. And I know the impact on the audience. And I did it for, I don't know, 25, 30 years, almost every performance. And people would come up to me and they say, that was amazing. That just brought me to tears. It felt so impactful. I don't know what it did for me, but I know it was big. And after a while, I came to expect that.
Hmm.
And I felt like I don't need that anymore. I mean, it's nice to know, but it's not, it's like I'm already filled up. I know, I'm certain, I'm confident in the impact that that dance makes.
Right.
And I'm doing it for service.
Hmm.
Doing it because I know that there's someone in the audience that needs this experience.
Hmm.
Not because I'm looking for people to say, "Oh, Linda, that was you're an amazing dancer," or something like that.
Right. And when you're coming from service,
Yes,
there's a different energy.
yes,
I think about that with therapists. Like if you are going out and giving talks in your community and you're coming from desperation, send me clients, I need to fill my caseload, that kind of energy, it feels very different for the audience than if you're there to share information you know will be helpful for people.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yes, we need to understand, like, what is my need for affirmation,
Mm-hmm.
from validation from others. And if there is that, that can be even a clue to what needs to be healed. Where didn't I get validation as a kid or
Right.
earlier on? And who did I want it from? And
Yeah.
let's see how we can clear that away.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, Linda, thank you so much. You've got your book, Delight in the Limelight. I love the cover art. I can see it behind you for anybody watching on YouTube versus listening. Like it's awesome. Um, so we will put a link to that in the show notes so that people can check it out because I think like what you're bringing up about processing through that stuff that makes it hard and scary for us. Like it prevents us from being of service in this way. And for people building their practice, it can make growing slower in a way that it just doesn't have to be. So,
Absolutely. Because when you are free of it, then, as I said, it's like, oh, good, it's my turn to speak.
right. Yes, I love it. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on, Allison.
Take care.